We're making our way through the age of the Reformation from 1517 to 1648. We've made our way into the 17th century, and we're talking now about 1618. The Synod of Dort meets and begins to question between Calvinism and Arminianism. So really there's a group that are more Arminian flavored. They're followers of Jacob Arminius, who disagreed with what Calvin and his followers taught. And so they began to question things, how bad is man? And he's not completely bad. He's got some good in him. And how does God elect? And well, he elects conditionally based upon what he sees, foreseen faith, and that Christ died for the sins of the whole world. Grace can be resisted, and you can lose your salvation. Those are some of the key doctrines. And so the Catholics got together and the Calvinists got together and said, actually, that's not what we believe the Bible teaches. And they came out with something that's now called the tulip. So T stands for total depravity or total inability, that man has been affected by sin in every way, shape, and form, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, sexually, spiritually, morally. All these things, man has been affected by sin and is dead in sin. Romans 5:12 and Ephesians 2:1, being dead in trespasses and sins. So because you're dead in sin, you're not able to please the Lord. The U stands for unconditional election, based on texts like Romans 9, verses 11 through 13, that even before Jacob or Esau was born, God, in his grace, chose or elected one, as opposed to the other. The purpose of election might stand. They hadn't done anything good or bad yet. He just chose one over the other. Unconditional election. It's election by grace. So it's God's grace in electing someone is the basis for that, not anything in man. The L stands for limited atonement. So they would say, no, we don't believe that Christ died for the sins of everyone, that he died only for the sins of the elect. And of course, there's a pretty strong movement that developed after that argued sort of in between those two positions, that, well, Christ died for the sins of the world, but it takes effect only in those who believe, or only in the elect. So they would say maybe an unlimited atonement with a limited application, something along those lines. So L again is limited atonement. Christ died only for the sins of the elect. The I stands for irresistible grace, looking at places like John chapter 6, verse 37, verse 40, verse 44, verse 65, that all who will come to Christ will be drawn to him. The Father will make them come to Christ. They're not forced to, but they will come. That there may be a time they resist, but ultimately they won't resist. Ultimately, it's irresistible because the Spirit's work in drawing them to see their sin for what it is and drawing them to Christ. And then P stands for the perseverance of the saints. Some would call it the preservation of the saints, where once God saves you by his grace, he keeps you by his grace. John 10, verses 28 and 29, Ephesians 1, verses 13 and 14, Romans 8:1, Romans 8:28 through 39. There's just a number of verses that talk about eternal security. And so the Calvinists came on the scene and said, we didn't start this argument, you guys did, but here's what we see. And so they laid out arguments against what the Arminians had put forth. Also in 1618, you have the 30 Years' War beginning in Europe. And so that lasts from 1618 to 1648. And they're still going at it. So they tried to have some peace in places, but the Catholics and Protestants are still fighting over life and death matters. In another part of the world, 1620, the Mayflower Compact was drafted as the Pilgrims made their way due to English persecutions. They make their way to the New World to be able to worship freely and to be able to spread the gospel. The advance of the gospel was part of that Mayflower Compact. 1633, Galileo is forced to recant his theories about the earth revolving around the sun because they understood the Bible, taught it was just the opposite. They taught a sort of a geocentric or earth-centered universe, not a heliocentric or sun-centered universe. By 1646, the Westminster Confession is drafted by Presbyterians, Independents, and revised by some Baptists, as they said, what do we understand the Scripture to teach? And it's a fairly thorough statement of faith that came out as they're trying to understand, or we're trying to promote what they understood the Bible to teach. And would go through some other revisions. Baptists would later use it as like the Second London Confession and so forth. But really influential theological statement on what they understood the Bible to teach, especially in the face of what had been so common among Catholics and now what was becoming popular among Anglicans. They're saying, no, this is what the Bible teaches. So Presbyterians, Independents, and later on some Baptists kind of come together with these statements. By 1648, there's the Peace of Westphalia. It ends the 30 years war between Catholics and Protestants that have been fighting over Europe, allowing for some form of religious freedom. They said, we're done fighting. We're just decimating both sides. Let's just allow this to happen. So now they're allowing for Calvinists to exist among that Reformed community, whether it was from Calvin or Ulrich Zwingli. They're allowing the Lutherans to exist among Germany and elsewhere as it spread, Switzerland and such. And then Catholics, some Anabaptists would still be persecuted, but by this time now you have Baptists on the scene, and they're starting to make arguments. And so there's a much greater tolerance for these different religious expressions because they're realizing we can't stop this movement. So that kind of wraps up a quick, brief overview of the age of the Reformation, 1517 to 1648.